May the 4th be with you. When you talk about franchises and movie franchises that have spilled into everything, this is it. Probably one of the most recognizable franchises.
And what's so funny is it's so revered and hated by so many different people.
Everyone's got an opinion. Welcome back to another episode of the Twisted Eras podcast. Your hosts Rob Stott and Doug Marsh of Twisted Eras. Fame, lore, the Twisted Eras cinematic universe. Can we call it that?
The Empire here.
The Empire. Yes. The Twisted Eras Empire.
That's right. That's right.
Does that make us the dark side or the do we have the Force?
There's a little dark side in everybody there, Rob.
I love it. Well, as this episode drops, we wish you a happy May the 4th be with you. And clearly, I don't think we really have to set it up. Probably one of the most recognizable franchises out there. I know there's many, but like when you talk about franchises and movie franchises that have spilled into TV and toys and games and video games and board game, like everything.
It
is
it. And like, and what's so funny is it's so revered and hated by so many different people, right?
Everyone's got an opinion.
Everyone has an opinion, because even if somebody like me who grew up with the originals and has seen where they've taken it, if somebody says they've never seen it, it still makes you mad. What do you mean you've never seen Star Wars? What do you mean?
How have you avoided it?
How have you avoided
life?
this? And it's like, what? Have you heard of the Beatles? I mean, come on.
Yeah. But present day.
Yeah.
It sounds like Game of Thrones. Like, when someone says they've never seen Game of Thrones, I'm like, you have gone out of your way to avoid it.
You know what's
just
going
that
on.
Thing. Also, it's also, I think it's a topic perfectly set up for what we've been doing, ironically,
Absolutely.
right? Because you've got eras of Star Wars. Like if you look at just we'll call it the main franchise, the movies, right? So you've got a set of the trilogies as they were, and you've got the originals from when they originally came out to the prequels. To then the sequels of the original trilogy. So all coming out within a span of about 8 years per trilogy, right?
Yep.
Or like
Yep.
so. But then a gap in between. So everyone's got their kind of trilogy that they grew up with.
But here's another very weird thing, and that's what makes the Star Wars talk so interesting. Is absolutely there are multiple trilogies. However, I don't know of any other thing that we can talk about that the original trilogy has multiple formats. I mean, that's an entirely the original 3 movies. They're not around anymore.
No, they've been Yeah,
they
absolutely.
Have been, and so in '97 he went back and redid them all, and it's terrible. Some of the things they added, you're just like, what are you doing?
Like you took the. I don't know, just the uniqueness and like what made it cool, and then tried to modernize it. I don't know. Is that the right term?
I guess it is, but that's when I try to say, it's like, hey, everybody loves it and hates it. That's why, because it's like, oh, I saw something when I was 10, and it was really cool, and when I was 20, they showed it to me again, and they had changed everything, and you're like, why did you do this? And to the point now. People are clamoring to get the original stuff because it was put out on VHS, and my last VHS box set up there was the original version. I think he had maybe THX the original in maybe '96.
Gotcha.
Right before they were going to put out the new in '97. So that's another wrinkle to throw in here. Imagine your favorite book. Sense and Sensibility was good, but it's way better in the remixed version, right?
No one likes the remix.
No.
I think if I had to think of a remix that I like, it's Linkin Park's Hybrid Theory when it got remixed, the reanimation. right? So
Yes.
like reanimation was really good. So
You
there's
had
some
to
good
think hard
tracks,
about that
you
though.
know. But yeah, there's nothing movie wise. Like no one ever is like sequels have such a bad rap,
Hmm.
which we've talked about in the past, right? We
Hmm.
did a whole
Had a
episode.
whole episode of sequels. Yep.
Um, so trying to messing with such a good formula for what made something great, and then it
It
boggles my mind.
it does. And what's amazing as well, once again, is if if you do anything well, everybody is going to steal it. It's just the way this is the way of the world. And so the original Star Wars comes out in 77. And if you go back and look at movies released from 78 to like 81, there's some awful stuff space wise that came out because everybody wanted to get on the space craze. You also get Battlestar Galactica that releases based upon that as well in that time period, which worked. And they revamped it. It was, it was better when they redid it. But anyway, it's not only is this movie everybody love it, everybody has been influenced by it as
Yeah.
well.
To where, not long after the originals are within that decade, maybe not within like the 70s decade, but late 80s, you get Spaceballs
You
too.
get Spaceballs in the mid.
Which,
It's in the mid '80s. He
yeah,
does it right in the middle. Yeah, post
like
everything. He had seen all the movies and then made it again.
just another one.
It is. It is. I wrote down essentially. I think it was like 8 to 10. I called them inspirations. The straightforward one is more modern. It's called Fanboys, where
Hmm.
they wrote a story about trying to see the Phantom Menace. You have Spaceballs. You have it's not a complete knockoff, but The Last Starfighter is based upon a video game where the aliens send a video game, the kid learns how to play it, and then they bring him into space
Yeah,
to help
yeah,
them.
yep,
Yeah. You
yep.
know, technically stuff like Guardians of the Galaxy can be Star Wars ships because it's out in space and he's great. He's kind of a Han Solo character. I like I said, I mentioned Battlestar Galactica. You have for a very, very short time, you have Firefly and Serenity, which are just, Disney did the Black Hole, which is
Hmm.
not a great movie either, but space based. And then you get the jackpot that is Robot Chicken,
Yeah.
and then the Family Guy trilogy. It's incredible all the stuff that
I we might
inspired this.
we might not be able to have a conversation around Star Wars without talking about another franchise that plays in a very similar space too, and that being, I feel like there's almost a mini rivalry between them, the
Mhm.
fans of them. I don't know if with the cross, I never really dove into it just like dawned on me too to have this conversation
Mhm.
now, but like the the disparity between, or if there is a lot of crossover in love or hate between Star Wars
Mhm.
and Star Trek.
That's a whole
Uh,
another idea as well. Yeah.
right? Because there's, I mean, the more of a TV franchise that turned into a movie franchise on the Star
Mhm.
Trek side. And I know there's people like I had an uncle that loved Star Trek, and
Mhm.
for whatever reason, he's my sort of just my only fountain of knowledge around the rivalry, I guess, between them, if you want to call it that. And
Mhm.
he he couldn't deal with Star Wars because he was such a Star Trekky
Sure.
kind of guy. So like I did you experience that? I never really like got too enthralled
So
or like
the
consumed by it.
the TV show is pre-Doug,
Hmm.
so I knew of it. They had a cartoon that they based off of it in the '70s, and sometimes it would show up. But my first introduction to Star Trek is there's this motion picture after Star Wars comes out. I think it's in '79, and it's horrible. I mean, like
Hmm.
really bad. I think even your Star Trek, diehards go back and say that the original motion picture is just not good.
Right.
But then right after, so Star Wars comes out in '77, and then Empire comes out in '80. Well, in between that, in '82, you get Wrath of Khan, which is the quintessential. That's their
Yeah.
Mount Rushmore. That's their peak. Um, and it goes toe to toe with anything. That movie's incredible, you
Yeah.
know. And so for me, that's really their only entry into this world.
Right. Right.
The rest of it, it's not bad. I can
Right. It's
watch
us. It's just
them.
not like I can't even think of anything similar to it, right? Because maybe the easiest way to describe it, like if you want action, you're
Hmm.
gonna go watch Star Wars.
Yeah.
If you want to watch like a congressional hearing,
Yes.
right? Or like diplomacy, I guess.
Yes.
They're going out and expanding the reaches of like the galaxy or universe. Like that's Star Trek. Is like let's go find Klingons and like other people we want to talk to, and
But you
it's
know, if you look at like Star Trek, this the theme song is amazing. It starts up, and you're like, "Oh, this is cool," and then you're immediately going to go to Star Date, this.
right.
Think about sitting down to watch the first Star Wars. You get a crawl that
Yep.
I don't know. I had never seen anything like that before, and now I am super young the first time it comes out. So my first initial Star Wars is like a reissue in
Mm-hmm.
'79. I think I was 5. They
Mm-hmm.
reissued it the summer before Empire was going to come back out. So that's really the first time I saw it. But like even then, you're like words
Yeah.
immediately pop
Well,
up,
like
and the
hold
next
on.
thing you know, this ship comes over top of you, and you're just like, in
You're in the
what is
middle of it. You get
you
dropped
are,
in the middle of it. That's what's so
and
cool about
so that's what right from the get go. And what's the first thing you see is these robots, and you're like, what? If you, granted, we're all old now, but if you go back and truly try to watch Star Wars, the beginning of Star Wars as it was, with like never seen it before,
it. Yeah.
that first 5 minutes is unreal. Because you get the crawl, and then you get the ship, and then you get these droids, and next thing you know, this really menacing dude comes out these doors. You've never seen anything like this before. And
Hmm.
so, for all like, I don't want to get into the end of the episode already. For all the bashing we do of the modern stuff, it comes from a actual just pure place of just
Well,
amazing entertainment. Just what mind blowing stuff right
you
from the get
talk
go.
you talk about that first episode, or well, first movie. If I could be wrong in thinking this, but like, wasn't it originally? It wasn't called Episode 4. Like
Mm-mm.
it was Star Wars. Like he had a thing in mind. He being George
Mm-hmm.
Lucas, obviously, the mastermind of all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, an idea of like what he wanted to do, but
Sure.
like he wasn't sure it was going to be like what an original trilogy was. He might have had the idea of a trilogy in mind, but like the idea that this was going to expand and have a prequel, have a sequel, like that was
Right.
not what this was intended to be.
Not at all. And I believe when he sat down and wrote it, he wrote a story that started and finished. He essentially in his head, which helps
Hmm.
the other two movies, was that he had this idea of what was going to happen. And it got to be, I don't know, 300 pages, and it
Yeah,
was going to be a lot of money. I was like, I got no shot. I can barely make this one. So
right.
he cuts it in half. And so it's why, one of the negative aspects, it's why the first movie and the third movie end the same, because he had no other way. That's the way he was always going to end it, with
Hmm.
this, Death Star being blown up. But you get this, you know, he had the premise already. He cuts it half, shoots the first half as this, you know, I don't think it was called A New Hope. I think it was just
Right.
called Star
Star
Wars. I
Wars.
think
Hmm.
if you find it on YouTube, I think the original crawl actually just says Star Wars. And then when he got it, it was very successful, and he made all this money and all this stuff. And so he starts working on a sequel, and he starts raising the funds, and he wants to do it himself again. So he bets on himself, and yeah, several billionaire now because of it. But
Yeah.
um, there's no one, I don't care who you are, would have imagined, if you saw a cut of that this would, I hate to use the term, but change the world. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
I think on the British citizenship now, it actually lists Jedi as one of the things you can put, just to say, what I am. You're like, are you kidding me? This dude did this. He
Yeah.
he he envisioned this world, and it's wild.
Right. And I mean, you talk about the inspirations too, like what he's been able to accomplish.
Hmm.
In that, the development of a whole, I hate to use the term because Marvel feels like they've taken it over, but like the cinematic universe
Sure.
of what Star Wars is, there's the mainline story that goes on. That is those three trilogies, right? And kind of everything spawns off of that. So you've got the interjecting movies in the timeline, and the cartoon shows, the spin-offs, all of the Clone War, like everything.
The
The
holiday special.
the toys, the books, the like the comic, but like everything that it's become,
Hmm.
you know, I know we tried to find there are other instances of like toy
Hmm.
franchises that launched because of a movie and things like that, but like this is the originator of everything that you see with like what George Martin's trying to do today with Game of
Hmm.
Thrones and having, you've got the Game of Thrones show and you've got now a prequel show and you've got another set of shows that
Right.
are in that universe, and like you get to play with all these characters and develop things and have different timelines within that. You like Marvel, another example, DC trying to do it too. Like
Hmm.
it was the originator of you could call it like money grabs, but like at the same time it's capitalizing on an obsession and a passion for everything going on within this space, and just like the creativity of it. There's so
Hmm.
much to it and so many different characters, whether you love them or hate them. You've got
Right.
everything from Darth Vader to Jar Jar Binks. Like,
Right.
so it's just, the wherewithal to like go about this from every different angle. And I know we could probably dive into it separately, but like Disney has a lot to do with it since buying
Hmm.
Lucas Films and the studio and all that. But like, they've got way more minds that can be focused on it. But like this was it. This was what
Hmm.
spawned all of the other ideas and universes and things like that you see today.
Well, it's funny, we go into the new era's style like we like to do. I know you're born after all this first run happens, but like I was saying, it comes out in 77.
Hmm.
I turned, I think, 4 that summer. I do not remember going to see this.
Yeah.
I think probably what I remember more than anything were the toys.
Yeah.
In this, what, Christmas of 77 or 78, getting Star Wars toys, getting your Darth Vader, your Luke Skywalker had an X-Wing fighter, my neighbor had the Death Star, and it was, and another neighbor had a land speeder and all this. And I don't even know if I'd seen the actual movie yet.
Wow.
Um, and so then we go and like I say, it seems like it's like 79. They re-release it. They may re-release it multiple times. I don't know. But anyway, I go, that's when I finally get to see it in the theater. And you're like, oh my gosh. Um, you're just seriously just blown away. I mean, the idea of a stormtrooper, whoever designed that, it's genius as well, because if this is just me and you out there with guns, it's not that menacing. But these
Right.
these dudes in all white unis, and like, what is this? Number one, and everything just
Yeah.
worked. It just worked, and like I say, my first experience is that. What I truly remember as the first experience is that in May of 1980, I was 6, but I was getting ready to turn 7, is that it came out on, I think, a Friday or whatever, and we ended up like in the neighborhood. Our mom's taking a half day on a Wednesday afternoon and picked us up from school and went to like a 3 o'clock showing on a Wednesday afternoon. And I do remember it still being full, like crazy,
Hmm.
and then Empire Strikes Back, watching it and just being, I still I still list it as my favorite movie of all time, and
Yeah,
because
it's
it's
gotta be.
just it's just incredible.
Yeah.
Everything that goes on. I was still, like I say, very young. I didn't know much about movies, but the bad guys win, and it
Yeah.
was like,
What?
is
Like,
this is this a thing? Like,
is this
and
allowed?
yeah, and you go back and you're like, even going back now, it doesn't happen very often in those old movies. There's an entire genre of westerns from the, 40s, 50s. The bad guy never wins. Are you kidding me? It's always the good guy showing up. And so you're like, number one, I remember asking my mom, did they really freeze
On.
Harrison
Like,
Ford?
wait a minute. Like,
Is he stuck in there for the next? And then Raiders of the Lost Ark comes out, and I look at my mom, I was like, I thought he was frozen. Did they unfreeze him to make this movie, and they're going to freeze him back?
oh.
What's going on? The child,
You can't comprehend.
6, 7 year old mind, like,
That's awesome.
what?
What's going
How
on
is
here?
how is
But
he in Raiders?
that's so awesome. I mean, has to be one of the only other instance I can think of around that time ish
Hmm.
of a bad guy winning, and this is entirely Philly bias here, is
Uh,
Apollo Crews. Just or Apollo Creed,
Creed.
sorry.
Yeah.
And Apollo Crews is WWE coming into my head. Um
Nice.
th- and he wins the first movie, right?
He
Like Rocky
does.
does not win that first fight. And in boxing, as much as there is good guys and bad guys, as you can make a villain in a boxing movie,
Right.
Apollo Creed was one, and he wins. He beats
He
Rocky
does. He does. But he is not as menacing
as
as
Darth
Darth
Vader.
Vader.
No, not quite. Not quite.
Ironically, though, you will come to like both of them. That's the
Yeah.
other very weird thing is the
Yeah.
first impression of Darth Vader is this is the
Ooh.
scariest person I've ever seen.
Hmm.
And what do I have all over me now? I've got Vader stuff everywhere. I
Yeah.
don't have any. There ain't no Luke crap in here. It's all Vader. You know,
Do you
it's
have a
like he
red
just
lightsaber?
it's a red lightsaber over here.
Oh, that's awesome.
But yeah, and but it's incredible. I mean, like that. I still, like I say, I remember getting out of school early. I remember doing all this
Hmm.
and just being blown away. But
I'm proud.
so
I'm
as I
probably
was
with
saying,
you on the earliest like memories.
mm-hmm,
Obviously, it's not, what the second trilogy doesn't come out until late 90s.
99.
Yeah, so
What?
um
But the special edition comes out in 97. So in January of 97,
yeah.
we get the three special editions, and it blew back up. I think
Yeah,
they made another 150 million or something
unreal.
crazy like that
Just to
on
redo
a
them.
redoing of a
Like
movie. That's
knowing
when you knew it was like, well, they're printing money
you
over there
talk about the
now.
timing too of like obviously knowing that a new trilogy is coming. Let's
Hmm.
regenerate that excitement around the franchise because it had been 15, 16 years, 17 years, something like that.
16 years, yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah, 14, yeah,
yeah,
because of
between
the
them,
83 to 97, yeah,
like knowing that you have a new set of movies coming out to just relaunch those.
yeah,
But prior to that, I mean, I'm 12, 11, 10,
okay,
11, when those come out. So for
prime
me, it's
age.
again, it's toys and Legos. And I had the name. Any Star Wars junkie is gonna hate me for this, but the ships that they fly at the beginning of Empire Strikes Back, where they tie the ATs around the
They
legs.
were called snow speeders.
Okay, there we go. So I have
Yeah.
like the Lego of that still sitting on a shelf
Ah,
upstairs, and Vader's three-winged ship that folds up. I've got that as well. So Legos were it for me. I loved Legos as a kid. I have so many Lego sets.
that's awesome.
That the Star Wars ones, they weren't $700 back then, so you could get like a little one for maybe $20-$30 and build it. So I had those. Obviously, the parents, were big fans of it because that
Hmm.
was their era and being teenagers when the movies were coming
Right.
out. Um, so sharing that with me and watching Star Wars as a kid. So like I got probably watched it around the same age as you,
Interesting.
right? Being
Yeah.
introduced to it, and seeing it and like the talking into a fan to sound like Darth Vader. It was always a
Come
thing we
on.
did in our house. Like who didn't?
Absolutely.
So then by the time like I knew about it and by the time the prequel trilogy comes out, I'm going to the theater with my pops to watch it.
Ready to roll.
Yeah.
Yeah, that era 99 was perfect for them because it was still you couldn't get assigned seats. You still had to
Mhm.
go wait in line at the theater to buy your tickets, and we waited for a long time to buy these tickets, and then
Huh.
got them, and then mass in, and um, it's like if you've never seen Fanboys.
Oh,
Fanboys is it's an interesting flick. The guy who wrote it, he came up with the premise essentially of a huge Star Wars fan like me, about that age, who has cancer and is going to die. And he's going to die before the Phantom Menace comes out. So these guys are going to break in to
yeah.
Skywalker
Yeah.
Ranch, steal a print so that they can show it to him before he passes. A great idea.
Yeah.
They go through all sorts of shenanigans and stuff to get there, but it's got one. They get there, and of course he is. He's not there for the. He gets to watch it. But they're there for the Phantom Menace. And I think the last line of the movie is like, what if this isn't any good, or what if this sucks?
Well,
And it's like, oh my gosh, this is,
foreshadowing.
this is the greatest line ever to a movie. It's like
Oh.
Do you remember the crawl? It says the crawl, like the crawl in Star Wars is going, oh, the Galactic Empire has done all this. The crawl in the Phantom Menace says something about trade
Yep.
negotiations or something like
It's
that.
terrible.
The Federation is going to put trade negotiations together. So you're going to send a couple of Jedi's to do some trade negotiations. Like,
Oh,
what?
right. Like
Wait a
there's
minute.
no, we're not dropped in the middle of a war. Like,
Exactly.
hold on.
So we're gonna have a meeting here. You're getting into Star Trek here, right?
Yeah.
We're have
Like,
the
hold on a
Federation
second.
Federation showing up to have some trade negotiations. So New is in trouble pretty quick. Like,
Yeah.
what? What? No,
I
what?
mean, that was kind of the biggest oh man, if we want to get into the might be a good time to transition
Mm-hmm.
and talk about the trilogies on their own and
Mm-hmm.
sort of deep dive into each of them. I starting with that early one, like the biggest failure might be the fact that it spent three movies doing something that they probably could have. I know there's the age progression and wanting to have like him grow up, but
Mm-hmm.
like the Anakin story didn't need to be an entire trilogy, I don't think. Like,
Yeah, I don't think he had it. Even the transition, the
yeah,
idea that this is why he became Darth Vader. He never
right.
had a great idea. He
No,
never did. And he's sitting there is like, yeah, I got to figure out something eventually. And I think he just ran out of time. And when you go back and watch it, there really is no transition. It's like, oh,
it's
you
all
know,
of a sudden the last movie.
yeah, we
Like,
have the ability to save to bring back life or whatever, and you're like,
right. Well,
that's what it
that's
is.
the thing. Like, so
Oh, I
concerned
never knew
about
I
it.
could do that. Let me go
Yeah,
kill a bunch of children now
right.
because you have told me that. And that's another weird thing is the idea is like he's gonna, he takes out, Jules from Pulp Fiction and then kills a bunch of kids and like,
What's going on here? Right.
what is up here? Is this
Yeah.
really what it took for you to just,
All to
but
save Padme.
yeah.
Like what? Like it felt so discombobulated. Not to mention the fact you had some of the worst characters
Oh, the characters are terrible. The
in those
dialogue is
movies.
terrible.
Yeah.
And granted, this is a celebration of Star Wars. This is Star
Yeah.
Wars Day, and I don't want to spend any more time on them than I have to. But
Right.
I think Attack of the Clones may be the worst movie I've ever seen in the movie theater.
Oh man.
It is a horrible movie. And even when I was in the middle of it, I was like,
What's going on
okay,
here?
what is going on? We go and find out that Boba Fett is some clone or something, and or Django is, and and you're like, okay, and then you get in this weird battle with these bugs, and it's just terrible, and then you get the sand, and it gets everywhere, and you're just like, what? Who looked at this and said yes? It it
Did he
is
just do it to do it? Like, did he do
he
it to get it
must
done?
have.
Like,
So
this was pre-Disney, right?
it is pre-Disney, yeah,
So this is
absolutely. And
like this
so
is entirely his fault.
it is entirely his fault. And I will say this: I don't want to bash on George Lucas because
Right. He's done
the
so many great
he
things.
did, and and just not even to take away. This is a Star Wars, but Raiders of the Lost Ark is one of the greatest movies ever made, and his hands are all over it too. And you put Spielberg together with it, but if you go back and look at Star Wars, what they call A New Hope,
Hmm.
Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, it all had screenplays by somebody else. So
Yeah.
it's his idea.
Yeah.
Somebody wrote the screenplay.
Maybe
And
this is like his
yes,
attempt to do everything and be
exactly.
the end to end.
And if you go in deep, this Empire Strikes Back was written by a woman. And she unfortunately gets cancer in the middle of it and
Mhm.
passes. And so it has to be, but all he had to do was look and say, like, I had a good idea, but I gave it
Someone
to
else like
these
let
other
let
amazing
someone else run with it.
screenwriters,
Yeah.
who don't think straight nerd like me. She wrote this incredible script that has action and it has
Like
romance. It
ebbs
it
and flows. It has all
it
the elements of a story. Like, right.
everything, and then he comes back to do the three, and he is a dictator. He directs them, he writes them. It's all his, and it's terrible. And so that's what jumps out to me is
Yeah.
like the idea that he did collaborate. Granted, those first three movies are his, absolutely,
Hmm.
but he doesn't have screenwriter credit on them. They are screenwrite credited by other people. It always says story by George Lucas, but written by other folks. And he hit the jackpot with who he had doing those. I'm always curious. I hate that hate that anybody passes away, but I've always been curious if she would have got to do the whole script, what it would have been like, and did the other person coming in and finishing it, did they add
Right?
stuff too? I don't know that. I haven't dove that deep, but that was always the biggest difference
Yeah.
between the first trilogy and the second trilogy is he did everything. And the dialogue just jumps out as just terrible. Like, who says this?
Right.
Who does this? And I'm not gonna sit here and just bash everything. The pod racing stuff was super cool. It was
Turned
way
it.
too
Hey, that turned into like a Mario Kart-esque game
the
for
video game was
NC,
better than
right?
the movie
Yeah,
was,
it
but
really was.
that scene is way too long. We don't need that much of it, but it was, that was cool.
Yeah,
But there is not much that you go back, and
super
I
memorable.
don't want to bash on the new one either. I didn't just completely despise the new one, but there are no characters in the new one either that are anything. It's like, why is what was the only thing popular about the newest three was when we brought out the old
Yeah,
people.
Han and
When Yeah.
like
Oh man, Force Awakens
Carrie.
is great. Why is it? It's because it had the Millennium Falcon in there and it had Han Solo and Chewbacca. That's the
Yeah,
only reason.
absolutely.
These new characters were terrible. You had no investment, and I really hated the fact that like they listened to us, the lunatic fringe, to drive this movie. Right?
Yeah,
What would have happened if after the first one they took the earphones out and just we're going to make what we want to make? It can't be any worse than what they did. Right?
no,
I
yeah.
mean, you can absolutely see, well, they hated the second one, so we're going to go back and do the third one. So let's throw away everything we've done and make the Emperor come back, something that no one wanted, you know? And you're just like, again, how did you come up with this? These are not dumb people. These are smart
No,
people. How did they sit there and go, you know what would be great? Let's put the Emperor back in there and make her related to Ray. Um, no, no,
yeah, it's all over the place,
it
and
is.
it's tough to see what
I
the
mean,
original was and kind
yeah.
of take that and what slowly like dive. I don't think the final trilogy was worse than the prequel trilogy. Like if you had to if you're putting them on a scale, which is a tough thing to do because of what they were, like it's maybe a little bit better than it. It doesn't. None of them. Again, this is a jumping ahead to the end of it, but
Sure.
like it's hard to beat the original,
It
and you're
is.
talking about an original trilogy, so I don't know that you can even make a fair comparison amongst them, other than the fact that they live in the same universe.
Let's get away from the bad ones and start
Yeah,
talking about the good ones.
no more of that needed in our
It's
discussions here.
joking. Like if you've listened to the other podcasts, I remember one of the early ones
Oh,
we were talking about baseball or something, and it switched to soccer, and I
yeah,
was
like we
like,
need to get the
it's
rails
like
back
we
on
got to
here,
let's get
back
back
on
on
the
the
rails.
rails of the good stuff,
Well, I got
not
a
the bad
question
stuff.
for you because
Yeah.
the funny thing is with that first trilogy,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that he went into it thinking that he was only going to make one movie,
Mm-hmm.
potentially, the cliffhanger he leaves it on two, and what he comes back with. I think at this point it's safe to say if you haven't seen them, we're not spoiling anything. Everyone knows, and it's why I'm, you know, uh, uh, wearing the shirt I'm wearing because I don't
Mm-hmm.
have any Star Wars paraphernalia to put on me, but like the father son
Right.
dynamic of Star Wars is what comes through and what's most memorable about that ultimate cliffhanger and the big reveal.
Mm-hmm.
So you were in the theater for the big reveal.
Yep.
What
Yeah.
was that reaction like for you,
It
experiencing
was
that for the first time?
once again 6-year-old um brain.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't know if I completely processed it because if you remember from the movie, he had just had his hand cut
Cut
off.
off, right? Yeah.
So 6-year-old's like, holy,
He's
his
got no
hand is
hand.
cut off. He's got no hand. How is Luke Skywalker going to fly his plane? How is he going to do his lightsaber? He's got no hand. And so I'm still, and then it went, I may have even like said something to my mom. I was
Wait,
like,
what?
is that real? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's what I remember more that
He
hand
lost his hand
falling. And
down the hole.
you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So I mean, think about it as a 6-year-old, almost 7-year-old kid, in the last 10 minutes, you saw Han Solo get frozen,
Right.
and now Luke has
Luke
lost
loses his
his
hand.
hand. So it is
Yeah.
overwhelming for a kid.
Yeah.
And then but once again, I think it's why, like I say, I think it's the greatest movie ever made. They one up themselves. It's like they can never one up themselves. Han gets frozen. What
Hold my
what?
beer.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That's exactly
Yeah.
right. And it was like being set up. And if you these modern movies, they really went crazy on the lightsaber battles. And so sometimes when you go back and watch the old ones, especially if you're a kid and you saw those first, you're like, these lightsaber battles suck. Why aren't they flying all over and making stuff? But in that particular movie, it's the first time he really used the Force as a weapon. And Luke comes around the corner, and the next thing you know, the theme kicks in, and he starts making stuff
Mm-hmm.
fly at him.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh my good. Once again, mind blowing. We see it today. We're jaded because we've seen it for 50 years. But him ripping stuff off the wall with his brain? Are
Yeah.
you kidding me?
Like
This
what?
doesn't
It
what
doesn't
what?
comprehend what's going on. Like,
No.
how is this possible?
No. You want to think what can make this dude even more evil? He can make stuff fly at me. Are you kidding? And so I think that's, why I just love it so much. Why it's even today when it's on, you know, it, it, you can just name off. There's a massive. They get eaten by a worm in space.
Yeah.
Are you kidding?
Those types of things. It's just like,
Yes.
what?
And it's got such great lines that I can't tell you aside from the bad ones that any of the lines in the prequels, but they're sitting there hiding on that Death Star, and he's like, yeah, before they jump to light speed, they're gonna jump their trash. He's like, yeah, we'll just float off with the rest of the junk. So, like there's these great lines like, yeah, we're junk too, and it's just so good, so much good stuff, and I've got to think, he made the first one. They knew how good it was, and they're coming in the second one. I've always talked about this as being in a writer's room or you're making stuff, or you like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. Now, he did have the benefit of they recorded Darth Vader stuff after the fact. James Earl Jones,
Yep.
just iconic voice. He's not with any of them, so they could make him say anything. So I think the story goes that the only person who knew that day was Mark Hamill, and so that's why he reacts that way.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe in the suit they were speaking to him, and I think they said Obi-Wan killed your father.
Oh.
So no
Well, they
one,
were trying to so
yeah.
that's
So
like an
in the
early instance of trying to
yeah
protect the secret, so like no
in
one knew.
the I think in the script it says Obi-Wan killed your father, and he reacts, no, not
Right.
true, possibly all this stuff. But he knew, and that's why he really lays it on thick there, to the point where I think Mark Hamill tells a story like he had that for like a year. He
Wow.
had to hold that, and he
Whew.
was talking about today. He's like, you can't keep anything a secret
No.
anymore. But obviously James Earl Jones knew it too because he went in to record it, and it's like, yeah, no, I want you to say it
I
like this.
yeah.
No, I am your father. I'm like, are you
Huh?
sure? Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what's
yeah, yeah,
that's what's being said.
yeah.
That's the line.
Okay, okay, I'll say that. You know,
I mean,
um,
might go down as one of the biggest like
it's got to
reveals.
be.
I
It's got to be.
there's some other good ones that we could probably come up with, but like
Sure.
that is the iconic just moment. Like how many? Again, you talk about speaking into the fan to create that voice. Is how many times do you say, "Luke, I am your like what?" That's
But
the thing,
what's the thing where we think we hear one thing and we hear
right?
something
It's not
else?
Luke, I am your
It's
father, right?
no,
No, it's
it's
not.
it's one. Everybody says that. Luke, it's no,
No.
I am your father.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, uh, he told me enough. He told me you killed him. No, I am your father. And you're
Right.
like, I'm pretty sure he said Luke in the movie when I saw it.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing about this guy is you can't trust him because
No.
you're like, you were messing with this, weren't you? But yeah,
Yeah.
but think about, and then that we had to wait 3 years. It took three
Hmm.
years to make these movies.
Yep.
And so I am not as big, like Return of the Jedi comes out. I think I was 10. And when I was 10, it was like, oh, this is so cool. But as I've grown older, it's gotten to be my least favorite of those. However, it still has moments.
Yeah.
There's still things
The
about
turn
it
of Darth, like there was hope for Darth Vader, right?
that there
Like,
was actual hope for Darth
hmm
Vader. Yes. I feel the good
like a
and the
redemption
conflict.
arc,
There
you know?
is no conflict. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But it, I jokingly said that the last movies were about, fan service and stuff like that. And Return of the Jedi has a little bit of that in there as well with, they kill Boba Fett like instantly and people immediately go, why did you do this? This guy had potential and he's going on to be what he's on the screen,
Right.
you know, a handful of minutes and, then he got his own series and, that they, they've had to figure out a way to get him out of there. And
Yeah, right.
you're like, oh yeah, that's another thing. He come up with these great villains. He's like, yes, this is a slug that lives in the sand that would digest you for like 100 years or something
Right.
like that. You're like,
Like, wait a minute.
well, that doesn't
That's
sound like a good way to go. And then
no.
the next thing you know, like, hey, we've got a Boba Fett series coming out. Okay, how do you have a Boba Fett series coming out? So he's got to fight his way
Wait
through
out.
this thing. It's like, but
You can write
but you,
anything into reality.
but I can remember when we were watching in college. There's a few scenes that are still, written for children, I guess. And in Return of the Jedi, we go into Jabba's palace, which is kind of cool.
They're
We
not
get
written for children.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right.
But as the camera pans by, this guard comes up to the camera and he like lowers his face. And I had a friend of mine who used to always go, "Don't worry, kids, it's just me, Lando Calrissian." I'm like, why is that not actually in the movie? Why is there not a voiceover
Oh
here?
my God.
Yeah, don't worry, kids, it's me, Lando Calrissian. Like, gosh, love it. But
Oh man.
yes, and the whole idea of this slave Leah,
She might be. That's like one of the
I
most
think the
cosplayed.
toy was called
Right.
like
Slave
Slave
Leia.
Lee or something like that. I'm
Just
like,
unbelievable. Like, oh man.
okay, how did we get this one through? But yeah, that was wild. Um,
Do you have a favorite character? Like, if you had to pick one out of the entire series, like, is it in my head? It's Darth Vader, just knowing what's around. But like, is there a singular character from the
so
entire universe?
so here's the problem with Darth Vader. I love that character. However, he ruined it by putting Hayden Christensen in that role. I just I don't dislike him. He's been in a few good movies. He's just not good in that role. He's
Yeah.
just too whiny. It's like, I'm sorry. This is the baddest dude ever created. He is not whining about sand. I'm sorry. But so I that is my favorite character of all time up until that point because it kind of takes something away from like I'm sorry,
The
you're not
lore
the
of
same.
Darth Vader.
Yeah, you're not the same person. But I gotta go. Han Solo is one of the coolest characters ever. And let's be honest, he's really playing Indiana Jones. So
Yeah.
Indiana Jones is one of the coolest characters ever. They're just so cool. Both of them just two iconic characters. So Han is probably
Yeah.
my favorite character. Granted, my room is covered in Darth Vader stuff, but it's hard. Yeah, he's up there.
Yeah.
It's hard to pick him after the
For what
prequels.
they did. No, that's
Yeah,
fair. For me, it was always Boba Fett, and it's funny you mentioned him and kind of what they did to him,
yeah.
and having to get him out. But there was just something about the mystique of him, um, and like
Oh,
again the badassery, like sort of
oh yeah.
anti-hero ish.
Yep.
Kind of Jack, like I think of a Jack Bauer in the Star Wars universe and kind of what he does and going around just he's in business for himself.
He is. I
And
think he's got like two lines in Empire Strikes Back.
that, but like
It's something like what if he doesn't survive? He's worth a lot to me,
Yeah,
you
right.
know? And
Yeah.
he's like, he won't be permanently damaged, you know?
Right.
And then I think he says something like, put him in the ship or something like that. I'm like, but there was just something about him. You're right. He's got
Yeah.
this jetpack on the back, and
And then to see,
his
like,
ship is this weird,
right. It's just how it flew around. Like, cool. Cool. I think that was another Lego set, now that I think about it, that I have.
yeah,
He, and I had like a G.I. Joe-esque action figure of him,
hmm
too. That was pretty cool. And,
yeah,
um, and then to see it like with the Mandalorian series and him coming back,
yep,
and just like just, I don't know. There was just something about him that I thought was always cool, and he stood out as a not obviously a big part of the Star Wars universe, but not necessarily a Han Solo or
right.
a Luke or Leia, anything like that. But sort of one of those off the beaten path characters.
But once again, he suffers from a childlike ending
Hmm.
where Han hits him from behind because
Right.
he's just,
What?
I'm just hanging
Right.
out
Yeah.
with my rope on Luke Skywalker, who is a Jedi at this point in
Right.
time, who, oh, I'm stuck by this rope.
Yeah.
Come on.
Use the Force.
Yeah. And so he gets hit in this jetpack. That's why I do have some problems with Return of the Jedi because it does have it has some prequel.
Yeah.
It has some
Yeah.
foreshadowing to some
Yeah.
of the
For how
things
things are gonna go.
we're gonna see. Yeah.
Uh.
But I will say this: the ending is with the song and the choir singing as they're fight. That's goosebump type stuff still
Hmm.
to this day, you know. Um, and he wails on him, and Lucas has something against hands because he cuts his hand off too. I think there's multiple hands cut off, and
It's
in
just
the in the prequels as well. And it's like, man, George Lucas hates
did not
hands.
like hands.
He did not
It's
like
it's
hands.
a it's kind of one of those, sort of, I don't want to call it cliche, but like the symbolic
Mm-hmm.
nature of it, right? You talk about someone that's done something wrong or bad and they lose their hand because biblical, I guess, if you will, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that sense. So I get it, and why it's like a refrain for him that he constantly goes back to. Um, but we haven't really. I know we did our bashing of the
Mm-hmm.
prequels.
Yeah.
We've hit on the awesomeness of the originals. Talked a little bit about the sequel trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any redeeming qualities of it? Or I know you mentioned the callbacks
Yeah.
to having Han and
I I
Chewie in
think
there, and
I thought I thought The Force Awakens was interesting. The idea of, I mean, still you get goosebumps when he gets on the Millennium Falcon. He goes, "Hey, Chewie, we're home." You're
yeah.
like,
Oh,
"Yeah!"
yeah.
The crowd roars. And at that point in time, the three new characters were
They seem to have a path
interesting
forward.
enough
Yeah.
that okay, I'm invested in Ray and Finn and I can't remember Poe,
Yeah.
and so
Yep.
you're like, okay, I'm invested. And then we get to the second movie, and the use of Luke there is terrible. That
I
this
felt like
old
they
crotchety,
wanted, like they tried to force him into this
like, let me make this
Obi-Wan
crotch.
type role.
Yeah, we're
Like,
gonna make this crotchety old man out here, and Ray goes out there to try to, and they sit there, and it's weird,
yeah.
and and you get this horrible situation where they send Finn to some casino where they're racing these I don't know, and you're
I
like,
can't even. Yeah.
I don't even care about any of. Why are you even and Rose, which once again maybe one of the worst characters ever. You're just like, oh goodness gracious.
Do you?
And now I will say this: the end of that movie is pretty interesting. On that sand plat, where
Yeah.
that battle that's a classic Star Wars battle.
Hmm.
Um, you get Luke in there with the whole,
Yep.
that's some good
Right.
stuff.
Yeah.
I can't bash that whole thing, but
Do you think they suffered from a little bit of overthinking the dynamic of Luke and Ray? Like in my head, and I think the way maybe there was like some intended misdirection, because I know
mhm,
she ends up being related to Emperor or whatever, and but like in my head the entire time you're waiting for the reveal that she's a Skywalker,
somehow,
right? Like that's
yeah,
what you're thinking, because she's got
somehow,
like, do you think they should have just gone with that? Would that have saved it at all?
I think it would have helped to have an actual story and not one that has nothing. So like that's the other thing that bothers me is that what happens in A New Hope still holds weight in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Nothing that happened in Force Awakens has anything to do with the
Right.
last movie. It was like the last movie is a standalone. We're just gonna throw crap against the wall and see what sticks. And unfortunately, none of it did. And they had highlighted like the Knights of Ren who turn on him when he turns good. Like, oh, these are the best fighters in the world. Ching, ching,
Mm.
ching. We're done. I'm like, what were they even here for? You're
Right.
just like, this is just
Like even down
terrible.
to her, like didn't she ends up using to hit Luke's
Sir.
lightsaber, right? Like
Yeah.
that was just it was like another like how
Yep.
did they even explain that? I don't
Never
think they
did.
explained like the
There is
fact
a
that
line in The Force Awakens that's like, this is a story for another day. She
and then they
literally
never
says that. And then I don't know if they told it, like the
they
comic
abandoned the
books
story.
would go off in different
Yeah.
directions. Like the last movie, C3PO has a red arm.
Right.
And in one of the comic books I was reading, they told the story of why he has a red arm. But like, who does that?
Right.
Who has this huge movie and you're like, oh yeah, you had to read this random comic book to figure out why it was. I don't
Yeah.
know. It
There's
was
something about pandering to the fans,
yes,
but like you also have to understand like deep fans would get that, but like
yeah,
not everyone is a deep fan, right?
yeah.
Um
I I don't want to go off on a different area, but um, Peter Jackson when he did the Lord of the Rings, didn't he do them all at one time? Didn't he go
that
and
sounds
shoot
right. Yeah.
shoot for
Yeah.
like? So he is done, right? When you get to the end, and now he just has to put them together.
Hmm.
You don't have to sit
And
there and hear, oh, we're we're gonna make this say what we want to,
right.
but we
Right.
have what that's what they should have done, and not had to,
Yeah.
it's not like they weren't gonna have the money,
Right.
It's,
Well, the crazy
yeah,
thing is too, they have to. You also wonder how much of a an adjustment was made because of Carrie Fisher passing.
it's a good question.
Mid filming of the second one, right? Because
It
she,
it
you see her kind of like dissipate out into space at the end of the second one.
and it's
They,
fair. And so when I do bash the third one, they had excess scenes
Mhm.
that Daisy Ridley had shot with Leia, and she's in that costume from the first one. So they had to go back and essentially make scenes. So she's doing the training
Right.
in the woods, and she's
Yep.
got the original suit on because she's getting ready to talk to her in that outfit.
Yeah.
I get it. So there's some things that that they had to change.
Yeah.
Didn't but still, and they had already shot everything. The second one when she survives in space,
Right.
which it's like,
Right.
granted, this is I get it. This is a fairy tale that dudes can do things with their mind, and
Hmm.
folks can do things crazy. Like there still has to be some rules, right?
You would think.
You know, I never saw Luke just hop out of the spaceship and go running through this.
Right.
You know, hey, R2, I think something's broke back there. I'm gonna get out there and help you fix it. In
Right.
the middle of space.
Like
So
no, that doesn't.
so even when it happened, it was kind of like there still has to be rules for
Right.
this. But
It's
anyway,
almost like, hey, you think she's, another, just like they're hearing what's being said, but they want to prove you wrong. Like,
hmm
yeah, we know she passed, and we know that you think there's going to be some big sort of like cinematic send off for her, but nope,
no,
we're gonna break the rules.
yeah,
That
yeah.
way.
You're right. It almost was like okay, here we
Like we
go.
got
That's
you,
how.
you didn't get
Yeah,
us, we got you.
yeah, yeah. But anyway, like I say, I think it's funny that we all love and hate this thing so
Yeah,
much.
right. You could kind of, it's to your point at the beginning. Like I do love it, and I
Yeah.
didn't, but you can't have a conversation about it without sort of gutting off on these tangents of like the things you find wrong with it.
Yep. And
Um,
you know, the idea of Disney Plus has been interesting for both, Marvel and Star Wars
yeah.
of continuing stories, and there's been some that have good. The idea of the Mandalorian was very interesting, and like, wow, this is really cool. This is a great new character. I bash all the new stuff, but I'm not. This is great, and the idea of another race of the child that
Hmm.
is of Yoda's line. What a neat idea. So you can't bash everything, but boy, then they come up with some of this other stuff, and it's like this is horrible. How did this get through? But
I
Disney Plus has been an outlet
Yeah.
for that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I
I
haven't.
also have a bit of I don't want to. Maybe it is a grudge. The way Game of Thrones ended.
Hmm.
Um, I don't even know that they ended up doing the movie, right? The directors that were supposed to do,
Oh,
they got off of Game of Thrones and were supposed to come over to Star Wars, and they
right.
rushed through the end of Game of Thrones to get over there. And I don't think they
Nope.
ever, because Abrams came back and took it over, didn't he?
He did.
So like the the way the sequel trilogy ends has
Hmm.
a direct impact on the fact that Game of Thrones ended horribly. So like there's that to think about too.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
but
that's a funny thing too. That third script that the other person had written is out
mhm.
there. You can go see it, and I don't think there's any mention of any emperor in there.
Yep.
But that's an interesting aspect of it as well, of the
looking
what we changed.
looking ahead too. I know I don't think there's a ton of detail. But we are looking at episodes 10, 11, and 12 in the distant.
Con-
I think December 26th. Is that right? We're supposed
Conceivably,
to see.
I've heard. I don't know if anything is rolling. And these things take a while, but um, it, I one of the things we've hit on the main movies, but throughout there's been this shift as well. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that I liked the standalones that they did way better than the actual other trilogies. I thought Rogue One was amazing. It's a hard watch. As I told somebody, I think my mom, I went with, took her to see it. And she's like, well, everybody died at the end. I was like, well, of course, mom, none of these people were in A New Hope. They all had to die.
Right.
And so that was a bit crummy, but they've even fixed that a little bit, I think, on Disney Plus. I think they've made
Hmm.
some prequels to Rogue One. I think there's an
Jeez.
Andor series that
Yeah.
they've
Yep.
done.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But but the Solo movie got killed. I enjoyed the Solo movie. I thought he did a great job as Han Solo, and where he meets Chewbacca and all this stuff. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it way more than I enjoyed these stupid, you know, modern day trilogies. So, but they thought they were uh, bulletproof, invincible, whatever you want to say,
Right.
and they were popping them out every 6 months.
Yeah.
Fatigue will hit you,
Yeah, for sure.
and
And
so.
that's where you get kind of the line change. And I think that's from what I understand, just doing a quick search here. It looks
Hmm.
like they're planning to start shooting this fall
Okay,
for the next one. So December 26th may be a little soon. It may be into 27.
gotcha,
But it's the Ryan Gosling led Star Wars movie. To
gotcha.
be in it
Well,
apparently.
he's a
This
cool
is
guy.
Games Radar.
Yeah.
So somewhat reputable source. We'll see. And
So
also if there it's Sean Levy. So
okay,
Deadpool writer.
yes.
He'll be the guy in charge of it, and so that gives you some hope, like ideas of getting different people to get their hands on it too, to see what sort of different take they can make on it.
Hmm.
And it's a chance. It kind of rinse and repeat, if you will, or at least maybe not rinse and repeat, but more like put the mouthwash in, get it out, and try something new.
Well, they've got to come up with somebody that sticks, because I'm sorry, it's not Ray and Finn and Poe. That
Right.
their stories just aren't interesting enough that you can. I think there was originally talk of maybe having a continuation, more Ray movies, and it's like if Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, and Chewbacca are not in those, and the Millennium Falcon and stuff like that,
Right. Killing
you're
Han, man.
oh
Oh, that was the
boy.
worst decision.
So where that comes from is he wanted to die in the carbonite. He did
Did he
not
really?
want
He
to.
did not
He
want to
did.
come back.
He did not want to come back.
So then they're like,
And
"Hey, we're gonna do a sequel
so he
series, and
so
you're
he
in it."
gave him his he finally gave him what he wanted. He wanted Han to be killed off, as like this, martyr, so to speak. And he wouldn't do it. It's like, nah, I can't kill you off. And so when they came back, they're like, we'll kill you off. It's okay.
Help
Yeah.
us get off the ground in this first one, and we'll do it
Yeah.
nice
And
and
we'll
early for you.
we'll we'll
So,
we'll, we'll, we'll kill you off. We'll kill you off. We got
oh,
your back. But yeah, no, I was sitting there trying to think of like other things that this has influenced. I will listen to movie soundtracks now. I don't know if that was a thing before. I know my mom had tons of uh musicals on album when I was a kid,
mhm.
but the idea that you would buy an album that was nothing but the soundtrack to this and just listen to it all the time. Still love it. You know, there are these iconic songs that have no words. The words are the images in your head of the scenes. I,
Yep.
I'll tell you this one. It's an incredible story. I have been married now for over 25 years. We got married in December of '99. You know, and as you know, when you get married, you're kind of, I don't say you're just there. You're not just there, but you know, your wife wants
It's like
this,
you're
your wife
yeah.
wants this, and your wife wants this, and so you're like,
It's
yes,
her day.
it really
Yeah,
is. It
it
really is, and it's
is.
a celebration of you guys coming as one. But you just want to make sure everything goes well for her and all that stuff. And I had jokingly, maybe 6 months before, said we were watching Star Wars, and the Throne Room comes on, which is an incredible song, and they walk in, dun, 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 and I said, man, that'd be a cool song to hear at a wedding, you know. So my wife, unbeknownst to me, when he goes, I now pronounce you husband and wife. It wasn't the dun 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 dun. It
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
that. It was dun 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 dun. And it was like
Oh, you didn't know? That's so awesome.
she.
That's so
The
awesome.
only two people that knew were the guy playing piano because he knew he wasn't
And
supposed to
her.
play, the sound guy who was going
Yeah.
to push play, and her. She didn't even tell.
That's
She
so
didn't even tell
good.
the minister.
That's
And he
so
joked
good.
because she had this in her mind. It's like he was going to say no, but he was not. He was a great guy. He's like, well, if you'd told me, I said, and may the force be with you, and something like that. But but yes.
Oh,
So the idea, you jokingly say, you know, hey, this movie is, you know, everywhere. It is. It was literally in my wedding. My wife did that for me on this.
that's
You
so
know,
good.
yeah.
So good.
So when you watch the end of Star Wars and they're all walking in to get their medals, you know, and that song's
That's
playing,
you.
that's what Doug and
That's
Lori walked
amazing.
out to that day.
That's so good.
Isn't
That's
that
almost
gross?
like the mic. If we didn't have to bring this home the way we do with
Boom.
every
Mm-hmm.
Twisted Errors, that's like the mic drop moment
Yep.
to end on. But
Yep.
um, I mean, I think we could probably sprint through an ending of this because I think it's pretty clear.
It is.
In my head, I could be speaking, I kids today that only know the Ren movies and or the Ray movies,
Ray.
like what they are, like it. Maybe that's it for them because that's all they know. But like, I think if you told them to go back and watch these movies, the original score, the original
Mm-hmm.
the original three, there is no way in my sane mind that you could look at what else has been produced from an era's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Like I guess that's the other way of looking at this too, right? Is like, do you look at it from the trilogy's perspective,
Right.
or do you look at it from like what it's become?
Right.
Because man, if you're to pick that original era,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have Mandalorian, you don't have
Right.
the I'll say the Clone Wars from
Sure.
a an animated perspective because
Exactly.
there's that side like those are
Huge.
awesome.
Yes.
The not the movie necessarily, but everything that you've got there and the um every other anime like it's become such a big universe
Mm-hmm.
of just awesomeness and creativity and like what we talked about at the top. So, if you pick that original era, you don't have all that necessarily, but like it was just perfect.
It was. It really was. And you can jokingly, you can run the first two movies together as one and never stop.
Yeah.
And it's going to go from the time the crawl comes to the time, you know, they're saying goodbye as they're going to go, as Lando's going to find Han, which ironically, thanks to Family Guy, he's in the same outfit that Han wore in the first movie. It's like,
Yeah.
never noticed this before. He's like, look, he's wearing the same outfit. Han's frozen. He stole his clothes. You know, he's like going through his drawers. It's like I need something to wear. So he puts the vest and the shirt on that Han wore in the first movie. I'm like,
That's so
I have
funny.
never. I've seen this movie over 100 times. I had never noticed that before. It's like Lando is in Han's outfit. You know,
Yeah, it's so
it's
good.
like going through the Millennium Falcon in the bedroom. Like,
Oh.
oh, these are mine.
Hopefully he
Love it.
did his laundry.
Love it. But yeah,
Oh.
it's a fair point. But if you want to truly talk quality, you can't beat
No.
those first three. You mentioned something, you know, it did everything. Like in my closet over here, I've got multiple Star Wars board games. Star Wars Monopoly versions and
Hmm.
Star Wars Clue versions. But there was an actual Escape from the Death Star board game. Got it right over there. They they were in so many different things. Love my father greatly. We have lots of common interests. This ain't one of them. He's not a movie guy. I would say my father's one of those who have never seen it, but he lived it through us at the toys. Like
Yeah.
I imagine the best part about Christmas is watching your kids open stuff.
Hmm.
And so my dad lived through Star Wars by doing that. By hey, I found this ship at
Yeah.
some random you know a thrift store or something, like, oh my gosh. And so my dad still has a lot of those toys in his
Wow.
shed, just out there that we grew up with. And
Hmm.
so all that comes from that first essentially 6 years of movie magic, so to speak. And we live in a different world now. It'll never happen again. It
Yeah.
just won't. You know, and not saying we won't have good stuff. It just not like this. There's too many other outlets to put stuff out. The idea that you could get seats to a theater now, so you don't have to wait. There's no camping out. There's no, we're going to be here all day, and it's a party like atmosphere. And the idiot in with the Batman has almost ruined everything for people dressing up to go to
Yeah.
these things
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
gosh,
That
stuff
was
like that
terrible.
is what
Right.
irritates. It's like
Yeah.
just this is a great communal thing that we're going to dress up and gosh, he
Yep.
ruined all that for that.
Yep.
So I guess I don't know. It's like you kind of grow up a little bit and it becomes more real. It's not this childlike world that
Yeah,
we
there's that too. There absolutely is
so
that way of looking at it.
that's why I have to take
Yeah.
the original era and
I think a majority of people would.
hmm
Even those born, you know, around my time or even later. Like those are just they may not know what those movies were like when they originally came out, to your point that you made at the
hmm
top, but like they exist and they're iconic, and that's what everyone goes back to. I think for me, your favorite movie of all time is certainly my favorite from this entire run of movies and shows and everything. It just it was so good the way it opens, and the snow, the scene out in the snow, like it's just so good.
who thinks that where we haven't had a battle in
In
the
the
middle
snow.
of of
Right.
Antarctica or
Right.
whatever.
Just like
And the idea of a tauntaun, who thought
right.
of this? And
I
I just it's and like even if you're not into sci-fi and you're
right.
not into this sort of stuff, if you just watch that particular movie,
Hmm.
it has not just science fiction stuff, it has a tremendous story of
Yeah.
you know, and we haven't even mentioned his name. I think I may have said it one time, but the introduction to Yoda in
Yeah.
that movie,
Yeah.
and he's
I know.
cracking jokes like he's Kermit the Frog. And that was another irritating thing is when you go back and watch the prequels, and
Oh,
you
the way
got
he
this.
jumps around and he's like,
He jumped around, but the first thing we
It's
see him, he's in a meeting, of course, because the prequel's all about trade meetings. And he's like,
like,
he's just sitting in his little chair. It was like the first time we see him in Empire, he's cracking
yeah,
jokes,
right. He's Yoda.
and he's
Oh, that's
stealing
so good.
stuff, and R2 tries to steal it back, and he's beating on him with his cane. Mine, mine, mine. This is great. Are you kidding me? You would write it the way he did in the prequels.
Yeah.
As he's very stoic, and but this dude shows up, come hang out with me, and you're just like, that's why it is just so good in
Yeah.
so many different things, and you know,
Here's here's a way of looking at it. We
hmm
wouldn't have what we have today if it wasn't for how successful and how awesome and how perfect
hmm
that original trilogy was. So that to me, you know, that's why that you have to look at that era as the absolute best era of what Star Wars is and
yep.
was, because it doesn't exist if they don't have the success that they did.
Does not. I told somebody this, and once again I hate to end on the prequels, but if you put a movie out called The Phantom Menace that did not have Star Wars, it would have made like $5
Hmm.
because nobody would have gone to see that crap. The only reason we did was because it said it was Star Wars,
Right.
and we thought, and it's got I mean, we're talking Liam Neeson's amazing, and Ewan McGregor is
Right.
amazing. You had a villain that
Oh, look,
it's
menacing.
still one of the
So
most menace.
yeah.
Like, how can you screw this up? You know, how
But they
can?
did.
But they did. They
They
did.
did.
And once again, we talk about the Boba Fett effect. They kill off Darth Maul almost instantly.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, the super cool villain. You know,
And just
let's give him two
kaput.
lines.
Say goodbye and move on to the next one.
But yeah,
Uh, well, I mean, for anyone that hasn't seen it, certainly worth the watch to go back and enjoy and see why it is the greatest era of probably one of the greatest movie franchises to exist.
absolutely. And
But
thanks to YouTube, we now have all sorts of little parodies and stuff
oh
like
yeah,
that are out there as well. So
absolutely.
I once again, I don't want to end with the prequels, but this made the prequels good. There's a lot of people who are putting songs to the battle. So when Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon fight Darth Maul at the end, and they put Enter Sandman to it, and he drops his robe, and Enter Sandman kicks in,
Oh, that's
you're
awesome.
like, oh, here we go. It's like it makes the prequels you can actually watch them. So,
Well,
but
hey, we hope you enjoy your May the 4th and
may the fourth be with you, everybody. Enjoy
celebrate it all. But until next time,
for
keep it
for those who celebrate.
keep it twisted.